The Air Force is racing to modernize its aging fleet of fourth-generation fighters to meet the demands of a new security environment defined by heightened great power competition. In particular, China is the foremost pacing threat for all branches of the US military. On this point, Secretary of the Air Force Frank Kendall sounded the alarm in April 2024.
As I've testified before this committee repeatedly, time is my greatest concern. We are in a race for military technological superiority with a capable pacing challenge. Our cushion is gone. We are out of time. As we have briefed the committee at a classified level, the pacing threat moves steadily forward.
As things stand, the backbone of the US fighter force consists of F-16 C and D and F-15 C and E variants, most of which are now decades old. Regular updates to these aircraft mean they are superior to most fourth-generation peers, but Air Force chiefs think they would struggle in a highly contested, advanced threat environment. This reality, alongside difficult budget constraints, is leading the Air Force to rethink its long-term needs, including how it will adapt its fighter force for the 2030s and beyond. To address the problem, the Air Force initially adopted a so-called 4+1 fighter modernization plan, focused on the continuation of 4 key aircraft models: the F-35, the F-16, F-22, and the F-15EX equal to and F-15E under the F-15 umbrella. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was the +1 in this plan, although all units are set to be completely divested by the 2028 fiscal year. As such, the focus will be on the 4 remaining aircraft models, according to recent statements from senior officials. Under the plan, the F-15EX and F-16 will play a leading role in homeland defense, with the potential for limited forward deployment to support fifth-generation airpower. A case in point is the deployment of 36 F-15EXs to Japan, alongside an additional 48 F-35As in July 2024. However, the US will now only acquire 98 F-15EXs in total, a significant reduction from the originally planned 144. Meanwhile, fighter and attack planes not included in the modernization plan are being retired rapidly, primarily to reduce costs associated with their aging airframes, which are straining the Air Force's budget. Notably, weapon system sustainment costs for the fighter force are expected to increase 40% above inflation between the 2016 and 2027 fiscal years. Based on the best current estimates, between 2023 and 2028, up to 600 fighters will be divested, while only 246 modern replacements will be acquired. The problem here is that US Air Force leaders are already facing a shortfall of fighter squadrons. At the end of 2022, the head of Air Combat Command, Mark Kelly, said the 48 available fighter squadrons and 9 attack squadrons of outdated A-10s were being asked to do the work of 60 multi-role fighter squadrons. Today, the US Air Force's total fighter force includes just over 2,000 aircraft, but only about 1,400 of these are active duty when taking into account training, test units, and other types. When applying mission-capable rates to these aircraft, the number of available fighters that are ready for immediate combat call-up falls closer to 900, according to separate analyses from the Heritage Foundation and the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. The bottom line is that the US needs a larger fleet of fifth-generation aircraft to meet current and future military requirements. This leaves the F-35 Lightning II as the real pillar of US air power, at least until the next generation air dominance program kicks in, although, based on the project's current status and potential complexity, delays seem likely. The original acquisition plans for its fifth-generation fighter fleet required the Air Force to have 800 F-35s in service by 2020, accompanied by 750 F-22s. But as of April 2024, the US had about 630 F-35s in service, including 409 F-35A variants with the Air Force, with the remaining aircraft made up of B and C variants with the Navy and Marine Corps. In addition, the Air Force has 187 F-22 Raptors, of which 123 are in the primary mission inventory. Since F-22 production ended in 2011, and with plans to divest older Block versions, including proposals to cut 32 Block 20 Raptors in the 2025 fiscal year, America's fifth-generation fighter fleet is currently much smaller than anticipated. The Department of Defense aims to procure approximately 2,500 F-35s by the mid-2040s, to be distributed among the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps. At the moment, however, Lockheed Martin can only produce a maximum of 156 aircraft per year to meet total demand from the US military and global customers, including the UK, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and a range of other countries. This rate of production is close to the upper limit of the company's current capacity on an annual basis. Despite the F-35 being cleared for a full rate of production in early 2024, actual deliveries are below this maximum possible number, as parts shortages, manufacturing issues, and other problems dent total output. The important point here is that current annual production is insufficient to meet both US and international requirements for the F-35 by 2040. International demand for the F-35 keeps growing, and this is heaping pressure on stretched production lines with an already high backlog of orders. In 2023 alone, Canada announced the purchase of 88 F-35s. Singapore said it would acquire a further 8 aircraft. Israel opted to buy an additional squadron of F-35s, while Romania submitted a request for 32 F-35s, which looks set to be approved. Meanwhile, the Department of State greenlit the sale of 25 additional aircraft to South Korea. And there is little sign of this demand cooling. In January 2024, the Czech Republic ordered 24 F-35s, becoming the 18th nation in the global F-35 program. It is unclear how the balance between foreign customer demand and US Department of Defense requirements will be managed, with annual production expected to be capped for at least the next 5 years. But the US Air Force needs an immediate boost to its F-35 fleet to meet its objectives as it seeks to replenish and modernize its fighter force. Right now, it is falling behind its benchmark acquisition goal of 72 modern fighters every year. On this point, a policy paper from the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies has called for a much higher rate of fighter acquisition by the US Air Force. It says the purchase of 109 aircraft per year will be required to sustain the Air Force's capacity and its modern capability, with the F-35 accounting for the bulk of these fighters. But recommendations of this sort require significant funding, and the Air Force's hand is being forced by strict budgetary constraints, ultimately limiting the number of aircraft it can actually acquire. Spending caps under the Fiscal Responsibility Act reportedly cut about 2% from the Air Force's top-line budget request for the 2025 fiscal year. Air Force leaders say this reduction has disproportionately impacted modernization efforts. The context here is that the US is running a massive fiscal deficit, while total federal debt is about 123% of GDP, meaning any further expansion of the Air Force budget could be difficult to secure. All of this indicates that the fighter force will be short of much-needed aircraft in the near to medium term, as budget and production constraints limit the Air Force's ambitions.